I have finally seen Transformers 1, and it only took me like 2 weeks longer to get my review out for it than most other YouTubers. So let's continue to fail to get algorithmic synergy, which at this point I am 100% convinced is fake. There is no such thing, because every time I try to do it, I get slapped into the ground harder than Glass Joe. But first, your likes. Please give, and maybe subscribe. And before I get into this movie, I wanted to share this picture of Bowser with you all. God, this was taken in like 2019. He sat down to play the Power Rangers board game with us and got mad about losing. Look at that grimace on his fuzzy little face. He was so angry. I'm sorry to say that he passed away on Monday. 19 years old. Great run for a cat. Rest in peace, legend. Now that I brought the mood down, let me raise it back up again. Transformers 1 is a really good movie, and quite likely the most cohesive one we've ever gotten in the fandom. The only two other options for that are the 86 movie and the first Bay film. And despite the love that I have for the 86 movie, it is only just barely holding together and constantly threatening to burst into flames. I mean, the movie requires Wreck-Gar to be omniscient and know who Galvatron is, where Galvatron is, what Unicron is, where Unicron is, and be willing to get him and all of his friends killed helping murder Space Satan, all because a dude he just met said hello the right way in order for this movie to work. I mean, you basically just have to make the joke, Ba weep grana, weep niniban. I would die for that man! Cup, what does the universal greeting translate to? I am the god of the universe, and if you die in my name, you'll get
infinite bitches in the afterlife.
That is not a greeting! And then the 2007 movie is a mess of like 3 to 4 different main characters who never meet, where the protagonist isn't really the protagonist, because the actual protagonist in the script is Michaela, but the movie shoots her so badly that you think that she's just there to be eye candy, despite the fact that she is significantly more proactive and heroic than the main character, with more to prove, with more hurdles to overcome, and a more complete story arc. Meanwhile, Transformers 1 is just a straightforward plot about character progression with a solid team of heroes, decent comedy, good to great action, and a vibrant and colorful world with a clear villain, who gets more than a couple minutes of screen time and a personality. However, let me be the party pooper like you know I'm great at. The ratings are overblown. This movie is like a 7 out of 10. It's pretty damn good, but there are some glaring issues that really should have been hammered out. So let me spoiler-free take you through them in this weirdly graph-centric review, which I am only going to show the first trailer for clips of, as all the later ones were so stupidly spoiler-heavy it was kind of infuriating. Like, if you watched all the trailers they put out, you could write a nearly perfectly accurate summary of the whole movie. But let's give the movie its praises first so you all can see that I can be nice. I was really worried about Scar Joe because Scar Joe fucking sucks. And maybe it's the fact that the character's face is animated, therefore the filmmakers could force her to not smirk her way through literally every line, but I thought that this was her literal best performance ever. She didn't bother me for a second, and everyone else I thought was great too. I was able to fully get lost in the characters. They weren't the actor doing the character on screen, they were just the character to me. And the characters were really good. You got a great sense for them, they all had clear personality, you could still tell who was who if all you had were the things that they said written out on a page. They are well-established characters who feel distinct with good interplay and good dynamics. The art style was also pretty good. The Fortnite skin aspect for the designs never fully went away for me, but the way the materials all looked was kind of mouth-watering, just with how it all gleamed. The world of the movie was gorgeous and wondrous, and even if the robots looked slightly too much like they were straight out of a game that I despise with every fiber of my being, they were still pretty cool looking, and I absolutely loved the fact that they gave them all liquid metal faces. Everyone always goes, they're super advanced alien robots, they shouldn't look human. But then they also go, they're super advanced alien robots, their faces shouldn't be flexible or made out of liquid metal, and they should all be made out of hideous garbage that kind of approximates a face. It always has and always will look just fine with liquid metal faces, and it is neurotic to argue otherwise. The story is also so refreshingly straightforward. It just goes from point A to point B to point C. It doesn't jump to point F, then back to B, then forwards to C, then back to A, then forward to D. It's a nice linear progression that you can follow that feels like it doesn't require mental work to stay tuned into. I can't describe how nice that feels with a Transformers movie. And there's some extremely good action in this film. The problem is this brings me to my negatives. You see, there is also some extremely bad action in this movie. I don't know quite what's going on in this film. It feels almost like the good animation team either got fired or they got tired, or they were only put in charge of some scenes and not others, or they had like one amazing keyframe animator and one complete novice. I'm not sure what's going on here, but some of the hits slam into their targets. Lights out, see you in a week when you wake up. There is one move that Orion Pax pulls in this movie that made me involuntarily go, whoa, out loud in the theater because I had never anticipated on using a transformation that way. It was sick as hell. But then there were a lot of hits in the movie that looked like they were out of that shitty-ass Legend of Hercules movie from like 2014. Things where characters who were legitimately trying to kill each other suddenly looked like they were play fighting and pretending to get hit. Like punches would slow down before they made contact and dink off their target in the most unsatisfying ways possible, but then they were still treated like they actually hurt. And then fights just kept suddenly stopping. Oh, we're about to get this badass clash between these two nope, that fight's over. Okay, but now we're gonna see this badass. Okay, nope, that one's over now too. Well, then surely this one. Okay, nope, this one's also over. And it kind of brings me to my biggest problem with this movie. It needed to be 2 movies, or it needed to be a lot longer. Like, why cut all of the fights in the movie super short? We wanted it to fit a pretty standard runtime. But that's something that, while disappointing, I can live with. The far more important issue with this is what it does to the character arcs. This is what a standard character arc should look like. It starts pretty static, gradually moves up, and becomes more steep over time as the character's outlook shifts more radically. Sometimes you'll hit these squiggly points where the character doesn't know what to believe or shifts backwards towards their old self, but overall, this is a healthy arc. Then one of the core character arcs of the movie looks something like this. It's kind of going flat, not really changing at all, till it hits a point where suddenly there's a remarkably steep escalation in the change to the characterization. That could still at least be a reasonably healthy arc, were it not for the fact that it instantly goes vertical, jumps up like 60 notches, becomes flat again for a while, and then launches vertical like another 60 notches. This is entirely because they were trying to pack a pretty extreme character shift into an hour-and-a-half long movie. It doesn't feel so much like the character grew into this version of themselves, more like they were replaced by a version of them from the future after they'd completed a bunch more character growth twice. It's extremely abrupt and shocking, and the sad thing is that this would have really worked given a bit more time to breathe. And the plot of this movie could have basically stayed the same. Just extend this character arc to the end of the movie so you only go halfway through it. Take that extra time to smooth the lead to this first jump out, and then trust that you will pick it up and complete it in the second movie that you are very clearly planning on doing. And the thing is, all the characters are kind of like this. It's just that there is a specific one that is more evident with than the rest, because even their mannerisms and way of holding themselves suddenly change to an extreme degree. And then back to my point where it's hard to mention the good without going into the bad, the movie is pretty funny. But for the first third of it, Bumblebee is cancerous. Like, the joke with him is that because the rest of the movies never let him talk, it turns out that he's actually a chatterbox who never shuts the fuck up. And it starts out relatively good. I think the Badassatron bit is pretty funny. I think that the character is pretty enjoyable, and then it gets to the point where he introduces himself to a new character and he's like, "Hi, my name is B127, but you can call me Badassatron. But if you don't want to call me Badassatron, that's fine. Badassatron abides. But if you don't call me Badassatron, what do you want to call me? Because I think Badassatron is really Badassatron." And I just felt the heat rising in my chest as I restrained myself from screaming at him in the movie theater that he was the death of comedy. And pretty soon after that, he did even more bullshit, and I thought to myself, oh god, is he gonna be like this the whole movie? But amazingly, the second that he's at his worst is the last time that he's bad in the movie. From there on out, the joke that he talks too much just becomes funny again and gets used less often. In fact, it's probably the funniest it's ever been after that. But for about the first 40% of the movie, it is just getting progressively more annoying. But speaking of the first third of the movie, the first third is heavily compromised for a very dumb reason. This is not a spoiler, but there is a sequence where there are characters on a train about a third of the way through the movie, and it's very clear that the filmmakers wanted to have a very specific dynamic with the characters during this sequence, and they were willing to do just about anything they could to force it to happen. And I'm going to change absolutely every detail about this so you understand my meaning without it being spoilers. Imagine that the dynamic they want is to have character A spill an entire bottle of wine onto character B's very expensive all-white suit on the train, thus ruining it. Now, character B should have been in the entire movie up to this point, but they didn't want to explain how their nice white suit didn't get dirty until now. So instead of having character B be there the whole time, instead accidentally forcing a whole lot of questionable plot beats to happen that don't make sense the second you think about them into the movie that shouldn't have to be there, instead they have character B going to court during the first third to argue that someone who let their dog pee on character B's house should get the death penalty. And your reaction is just kind of like, am I ever supposed to like this person again after this point? Like, they are so insanely selfish that other people's lives just don't matter to them. And sure enough, by the end, you are supposed to like the character. And I'll give it to the movie. It does a decent job of making you forget all that. But at the same time, why compromise so much of the start and make a character that you are supposed to like look like a shit person when you could have just had them put on the white suit just before getting on the train? Again, every ounce of that metaphor has been changed just to not give spoilers. It's just meant to convey that there were very easy solutions that didn't require character assassination for someone you are supposed to like, and that didn't require the character to be absent for things that they probably should have been present for, nor create plot holes that have no business being there. And also plot holes that could very easily have been fixed with additional information that's already supported by the content of the movie. But I think I'm going to do a separate spoilers video to go over the issues and more clearly lay out what could have been handled differently as to result in a film that would actually have been a 9 out of 10. There are also a few things that happen in the movie because the movie needs them to happen so it can finish in the runtime it has, which, if the first third of the movie wasn't so messy, might have had a little more time to reach their logical conclusion without making the movie longer. Or if the movie was just longer like it should have been, it could have been paid off better. And a last few points of order before I close out this video. Starscream was the one character in this movie who I just didn't think worked for me. I was very excited when I heard that Steve Buscemi was going to play him. I thought that was genius. But now, having seen it, I don't know if he's too old or he just wasn't trying to do a voice, but all he sounded like was Steve Buscemi, and it's just off. But the whole character is kind of off. Like, he's remarkably brave, but somehow also a coward at the same time. Because in the face of death, he had balls, and in the face of a fair fight, he was scared. That was just weirdly inconsistent. Oh, and one thing that drove me absolutely up the wall in the movie is that they kept saying cycles, which means minutes, when they clearly meant eons. The whole movie, it just sounds like they keep saying, 50 minutes ago, the Roman Empire passed into myth. And it's like, what the fuck are you talking about? I'm obviously not an idiot, so I know that they have to have meant something longer than that, but what do they mean? Because cycles refers to a very short period of time. So are we talking days? Obviously not. Months? Can't be. Years? Also not long enough, because somehow in that time, Cybertronians, creatures who live for billions of years, forgot parts of their history in less than one human lifespan, which may as well be minutes to them. And you may come up with a million excuses, like Cybertronian years are 100,000 times longer than human ones. Or you may say that cycles in this continuity just mean some extreme amount of time. But if either of those are the case, then why not just use a word that already exists in the Transformers that does mean a long period of time, or come up with a new one? That way the characters aren't talking about the ancient past like it was one episode of Game of Thrones ago. And every excuse that you come up with doesn't change the fact that when I was watching the film in the theater, I was confused as shit and taken out of the movie as I tried to figure out what they meant. Because my first reaction was, oh, I must have misheard that. What did he actually say? Okay, no, I did actually hear that right, but that's not correct. So what is he trying to mean? Is it trying to imply a short period of time, or are they just brutally misusing the name of a short period of time? Why wouldn't you just call it something like hypercycles or omega cycles or galactic cycles, you fucking idiots? And just sitting there saying it was their movie so they could do what they want with it is the same thing as saying it's their movie so they have the right to be wrong, but even though it is wrong, I say it's right because they did it. Which is logic I've seen used to defend movies where the plot doesn't make literally any sense. And I don't want to hear that cycles have meant different things before, because that doesn't matter when we have correct terms for extremely long periods already. And no matter what the other uses meant before, it clearly never meant what they want it to in this movie. So why defend this decision? Would it have made your movie-going experience worse for them to use a more accurate term? I think we both know the answer is obviously not. So they took a section of us out of the movie because they couldn't be fucked to use a better term. But ultimately, this is a really good movie that, if they trusted the fact that they're getting a sequel and thus allowed the character arcs more time so they can be a bit smoother, and didn't bend over backwards to crowbar in a character dynamic about a third of the way through, could have easily claimed the title for the best Transformers movie. And to be clear, it might still be the best Transformers movie, but it's not as clear-cut as people are saying it is. The only thing that I can really say that they flat out needed to do better on rather than simply restructure or slow down was the consistency of the action. I don't know why some of that was the sickest shit I've ever seen and some of it was just laughably weak looking. I think that if you are a regular moviegoer, you are going to like the movie. It will be a good time and you won't regret a thing about seeing it. It might even make you interested in the wider fandom. And I think that if you're a Transformers fan, the movie is going to be even higher in your opinion. And it might be your favorite of the year. This is a very good movie that is just tweaks away from being something truly spectacular. And I look forward to actually explaining what I mean with a spoiler video and the hopefully inevitable sequel that this will spawn. But before we go, let's thank a channel backer. And this time it's Aximus Prime with Shattered Glass Soundwave. And I swear I've done this before and am losing my mind. But Shattered Glass Soundwave just looks so goddamn cool. Why does Soundwave look so good in white? To be fair, it helps that the blue paint they've put him in is so shiny. Dude just looks sick and the headband is working for me too. I just wish it wasn't the terrible Earthrise mold myself, but I'm still so tempted to get it. And that's not half what I have to say, but it's enough what I have to say. And I know, you know, what everyone else tells you to do at the end of these videos. So if you liked what you saw here, please do that. And if you'd like to take it a step further, then please share this video with any friend you think may be interested. I hope you all enjoyed listening to me waste your time.